Hi there, it's Kevin with the Rogue Market here with a video discussing the Ikoria layer of Behemoth's Mythics. Not really going to focus too much on prices because prices are all up in the air depending on how this pandemic is going to play out. I really think that we are still going to see the secondary market crash harder and harder as people, of course, lose income and jobs. And the thing with the secondary market as far as Magic the Gathering is concerned, it's also kind of the residual overflow from the primary market of sealed product. And so I think we're going to get hit with a double whammy with, less sealed product going necessarily around, but people still choosing to spend money on the sealed product rather than on the secondary market. So we're having a market within Magic where Wizards of the Coast continues to print more and more sealed product and put that on top of the growing uncertainty with income and whatnot with the pandemic. And I think that talking about prices is just kind of reckless at this moment. Anyway, that's not what this video is about. This video is discussing the Ikoria layer of Behemoth's Mythics and how well they're going to perform. I'm going to give my analysis based upon their current price, and we can kind of gauge that based upon other ones that do exist. So we have a pretty huge spread from $28 to $6 for these pre-selling cards. So let's start from top to bottom, and I'll give my analysis of the cards. So let's start with Kinnan Bonder Prodigy. This is a 2-mana 2/2. That doubles, well, it doesn't double it. It allows for non-land permanents to add additional mana to their mana when they are tap form mana or when they produce mana, however they produce it. There are some interesting things with this card because it doesn't say, oh, it is whenever you tap a non-land permanent. I was saying that it would generate from other ways, but it is when you tap a non-land permanent. So you're not going to get another boost off of like a Burning Emissary. So it is the tap. And of course, with Commander, this is where most of this demand is. It's turned Soul Ring into tapping for 3, which can give a huge boost. A lot of the archetype of green and blue does want to be ramping, but they traditionally have done that through lands, and there are a lot of competitors with increasing the mana base. I think that this one is actually going to fall in price comparatively because I think it's more of a niche card than a card that's going to go in, say, every deck. Now, Commander players might disagree with me that you're just going to slot this in any Simic deck, but right there alone is something this card doesn't have going for it, is that it is only be able to go in like cards that are Commander decks that have this color pairing, and there's a lot of competition for this slot. In particular, when we're looking at like Standard and Modern and Pioneer, this is where I think this card loses a lot of its value. It's just in Pioneer and in Modern, it's Lightning Bolt Fatal Push can take care of this. You're really not going to get a lot of value out of it before it's going to have to sit around for an entire turn before you can get value out of it. If you can get this card to stick, the 7 mana is pretty decent to then put a non-human creature from among them on a battlefield for their top 5, but you could actually miss quite easy with this huge cost of 7 mana to try to cheat in a card. So it's one of these cards that really looks good on paper until you actually start playing it. And I think that people are going to realize that it's going to be hard to curve where you want this card to curve with like mana rocks to be adding those additional mana because this is taking your two drop slot, and then you're going to have to cast something and then hopefully have the mana left over for it. But B, it's just a very, very susceptible card to removal. You can kind of compare this like Incubation Druid. There's a card right now that exists that it's a 0/2 and taps for mana, and if you can pump some mana into it, it will tap for 3 mana. But if you've ever played Incubation Druid, that card never sticks around by the time it can actually tap for 3 mana. It just gets Fatal Push, Lightning Bolt. You have to block with it against mono red. And I'm thinking for those reasons, this card is definitely going to fall in price. Again, what it really has going for it is Commander. Let's see if Commander can actually have enough demand for this to hold its price tag. But for cards that come out of new sets, I think they need some eternal playability, even something a Modern, Pioneer, Legacy, beyond just even Standard to hold these $25 price tag pluses. And since this card isn't, in my opinion, going to hit decks as easily as people will think it will, this card is going to come down. Let's go on to the next one, which is the Fiend Artisan. This one is a very interesting card because it just seems like it's value city here. It can go in mono green decks, it can go in mono black decks. It also has a devotion for if you're going like a Great Merchant of Asphodel deck. We have already seen mono green with the Nykthos Shrine Nyx be very popular in Pioneer. And this has a very relevant ability with many different archetypes. So it gets +1 for each creature card in your graveyard. This isn't too terrible just in like a stompy base deck if cards have died. Of course, you want to maximize it with having more cards in the graveyard with Self-Dredge or Self-Mill. But the other ability with having this pseudopod type ability with X and a hybrid mana to sacrifice another creature, search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less, and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. That is pretty neat to actually build this card up. So it really is sort of like a Fauna Shaman, but goes onto the battlefield, so people can argue that it's more powerful. And again, in Commander, there's going to be a lot of demand for this card. So yeah, it's similar to other things that do currently. It does require some mana to go into this card, though. So you're gonna go get a card that costs 1 more than its converted mana cost every time, and then need to have a creature. This card again needs to stick around, but I do like this one more than the Kinnan Bonder Prodigy. I think this is gonna be more awkward than people right now are assuming. This card is just gonna be a pod. Like, pod is just eons above this card in my opinion, because this does require huge mana dumps, so you're going to be putting a lot of mana into it. It's got to survive, but in the right deck that both utilizes tutoring up cards as well as your graveyard, I could definitely see this card being a powerhouse in those particular decks. Though I do think it's way more niche though than say like a Euro coming out of Ikoria, or like an Embercleave. So my judgment for this one is probably going to go down, relatively speaking, to the other Mythics in this format. I mean, it's a great card, but price point, though, seems a little rich for my blood. Narset the Ancient Way. So I've learned over the years that 4 or 3-color Planeswalkers are very, very tough to find homes, A. And B, there's just not enough homes, even if it does find a home in that archetype, to really make sense. This card is decent in like Fires of Invention, other than it's got some non-bows with Fires of Invention with the +1. The drawing a card ability and then being able to discard a card and then dishing off damage equal to converted mana cost means that Narset's going to protect herself quite easily and get value immediately. I mean, you got to assume that pitching the card is going to be valuable. So any cards that want stuff in the graveyard, it's going to get value off of that, and then being able to protect it. It does exactly what a non-creature spells deck does want, which gains life, generates mana, and draws cards. If you can get up to the emblem, it's pretty neat too with the -6, but I don't think that this card is that powerful in the scope of things. It feels very similar to a lot of the 4-mana Jaces that have come out and then put on the fact that you have to have 3 colors in this, that I think is going to have a hard time really finding a home as a 4 of in most decks that it actually can find a home in. Now, it might be, my analysis might be off on this card, but still, that is my judgment, that it's 16 even seems a little bit rich for this. It's going to come down as time goes on. Not saying it's a terrible card, not saying it won't see play, but that's pretty rich for being the 3rd most expensive Mythic in the format. And this, again, is going to be a set that's going to have a hard time holding value because of the Tricycle lands, because there's a lot of other, shiny stuff that people want out of this set. So rares in this set, in my opinion, are going to hold the vast majority of the value. All right, then we have Viviane, Monster's Advocate. This is probably my favorite Mythic out of the set. So its static ability says you can look at the top card of your library anytime and you can cast it if it's a creature spell. So we've seen that type of effect on 4-mana spells in the past, and they haven't quite seen as much play because they're quite vulnerable. But on a Planeswalker, I do like this card because it's going to dish out a 3/3 beast immediately. And then you can put Vigilance, Trample, or Reach on it, which isn't too terrible for the +1 ability. But if you don't want to use the +1 ability either, you can actually use its -2 immediately, which is when you cast your next creature spell this turn, search your library for a creature card with lower converted mana cost. So actually, you probably don't want to do that immediately. The good thing about this is Viviane, Monster's Advocate, gets 2 times of using its -2. So if you go +1, -2, -2, you just got extreme value. So if you're looking for like a curve-based, stompy base deck or something else, value-based deck, enter the battlefield, trigger-based, this is a perfect card. It basically is what? Cascade to the creatures that you spell. So the next time you cast a creature spell this turn, search your library for a creature card with lower converted mana cost. So you search, so it's even better than Cascade. So there's going to be a lot of wombo combos that I can see happening. So like at a Pioneer, for example, you cast a Tarka and then go get Xenagos, and then you've just won the game because a Tarka is going to get double its power from Xenagos and then get haste and then attacking with double strike and just win. I mean, that's kind of a janky Timmy combo, but still, that's a 2-card combo that can just win out of nowhere. And Viviane is going to set these type of combos up. Has that tooth and nail type feel to it with just his -2, casting one of those and then going and getting the other one that is going to finish off the game. So I think that this one is probably priced accordingly. It's going to be a good card in Constructed. I would assume there will be some Pioneer decks and some standard decks that this does see play. You might see this actually see play in Modern if people can actually come up with like a good curve and a good combo for these pieces. And I think people, I don't know, at the fourth most expensive Mythic, I think it's right on par. In my opinion, this is my favorite one. It's the easiest one that I can see seeing like a dominant sort of play in formats. All right, so let's go on to the Luminous Broodmoth. I think this one's going to go up in value because it's the best Mythic in the format that I can see going in like Modern Legacy and just crushing formats. People have already identified combos with Persist, that if you stack the counters right, the triggers right, you can go infinite with the sack outlet. It's very easy to set that up. It's also very easy to set up with permanents can't be placed on creatures, so then you can just keep killing whatever enter the battlefield effect over and over with the sack outlet and then just go infinite there. It's a 4 mana, not very tough to get out, a 3/4 flying, that's pretty decent. And even without that combo aspect to it, it has a pretty good ability. So anything dies, it comes back with flying. We've seen it with the Theros card that does Nightmare Shepherd that does something similar, but I think this one has an edge over it because it doesn't come back as a 1/1. It actually comes back with a plus as well as getting flying. So there could be many different like mono white decks where they want to use this kind of a curve topper, and I believe that if it dies with it, the ability still does trigger. So you got to assume this has some anti-board wipe effects to it. So I am liking Luminous Broodmoth a lot. I think it's going to probably end up being the Mythic that ends up being brewed with and talked about and played off week 1 the most. So definitely keep your eye on this particular card. All right, then we go on to the Luna Apex of Wishes. All the mutate cards are kind of awkward for what they do. We don't know how well this ability is going to take effect. The good thing about these mutates, you can put it on top of or below, so you can turn a low creature into something flying trample and a 6/6 right off the bat, and maybe get any other abilities that are with it. So like early case cards with Death Touch, Lifelink, those type of stuff. Now you have a flying trample. And also whenever this creature mutates, you exile cards from the top of your library until you exile on permanent and put that card on the battlefield or into your hand. So that's pretty solid with the mutate ability for 6 mana. You get a 6/6 with other text it's going to read on top of the card with flying and trample. And then if you can continue to mutate, so you have a deck that has the mutate-centric theme to it, you're going to be able to have a lot of value off of this card. Again, I think that this, with the teamer aspect to it, might be asking a lot for this card to hold a high price tag, but I do think this will be one of the more chase mythics because it's out of the mutate cards, I think it's the best one. And it's nothing to get too excited for with its current price tag, though, because I think it's probably on par of what its potential is around that $15 mark. You got to assume that this, with collector's editions and other ways to really spice up this product, that these are something has to give, and it's gonna be cards like this that are gonna have a hard time if they do see lots of play going up to any insane value. I mean, look at the cards that have gone over $20 in the recent standard sets, and they're cards like Euro that see just dominance over multiple formats. All right, the next one is the Avada Apex of Thunder. This is currently priced at 11. It has a mutate of 4, and flying first strike, and whenever this creature mutates, you may cast target non-creature card with confirmed mana cost 3 from a grave without paying its mana cost. So this is like a neat little Snapcaster mage if you do have a target out. So it might even be better. You know what? This one might... I could actually see this one being quite dominant. The 3/3 flying first strike is pretty good for 3 mana. And then you get once this does mutate, and so for 4 mana, any non-creature that you can mutate on this is going to, you're going to turn it into a 3/3 first strike. And so if you're looking at this as an aura and having a creature change the base power toughness of a non-human creature to 3/3, give it flying, give it first strike, let it retain any text that it has, and then when it mutates, which it has mutated, you cast a non-creature card with preferred mana cost 3. So if you have things like bolts, things like, I'm trying to think what other stuff in Jeskai that, look at standard at the moment, things in Jeskai that you can then cast. The potential of this card is definitely, the upside of this card is definitely there. So it'll be interesting if this one is the card that I can see 4 ofs, because mutating still triggers it with multiples. Correct me if I'm wrong. So you mutate it, it enters the battlefield, it considers it mutate, it falls off, I believe, because it still reads the card type with the card. Someone in the comment section, let me know if I'm wrong or right. It wouldn't matter, be redundant text to begin with, but I believe the mutate versions would stack though. So yeah, some of the comment section and judge, let me know exactly how this would work. I'm thinking it would fall off, but you'd still get the trigger from the mutate. Would you get double triggers off of multiples of this? So if you're getting, if you get double triggers off of mutating a Vadrix onto a Vadrix, that actually seems pretty insane, as you'll get two cards from your grave you'll cast for free. So you got to feel like this one's like Annex from Standard right now. That if you cast Annex with Annex, you actually get 4 Satyr tokens, which isn't a bad investment for 3 mana. And that's why people have no problem playing multiples in the deck. So this one's actually quite interesting now I'm reading over and looking at through the implications of this card. All right, then we have Luca Coppercoat Outcast. Luca Coppercoat Outcast is definitely a Johnny's wet dream here. It says exile the top 3 cards of your library. Creature cards exile this way. Again, you may cast this card from exile as long as you control Luca. So Luca's going to be a good way. It feels like a very green ability on this card. So as long as Luca stays alive, you can cast creature cards. So this is a huge draw outlet. It could definitely be a replacement for like the enchantment. What's the one? Experimental Frenzy. When Experimental Frenzy rotates, and it has a reasonably high toughness or loyalty that it's going to survive a few hits, and then you're going to be able to protect it with all the card advantage. And then the -2 is pretty insane too. The exile target creature you control, then reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card with higher converted mana cost. So this has this polymorph, but the thing is, like, you can really set this up with a big curve topper. So for example, you kill your 4-drop, you cast this card, you kill your 4-drop on curve. You have in Standard, maybe you have a Meteor Golem as your curve topper. It comes into play and kills any permanent. That's pretty decent. Or like right now in Standard, like a good card would be like Agent of Treachery. That's like what most people are curving in, or are trying to ramp into, is an Agent of Treachery. So you basically turned a 5-drop into an Agent of Treachery, which then later on you could actually possibly even kill your Agent of Treachery if you have something even bigger than that. So if you have like an 8-drop in your deck, that could actually be something you could hit with it. But I don't think that this is a unreasonable card to assume that it's going to see play in various different decks. It's pretty easy to be, broken with the right combinations, especially when you 100% set it up. Look at things like when people found out the combo of now I can't think of the card that goes through your library until you get an artifact, and then you lose life equal to how many cards you revealed, and then the Platinum Imperium and the Madcap Experiment. And those type of cards, like at first people didn't really give that any credibility, but it actually lasted the test of time until Modern really got degenerate. You still see every now and again some Modern decks that do run that combo, but Luca, I think, can easily set some sort of scenario up like that, where it's just one card, one high converted mana cost card, like even Emrakul, in your deck, and then have tokens or in Standard I have like Dwarven Mine that will generate a 1/1 token just off the land entering the battlefield. You sack it. I know it's a big nombo with that +1, but same thing, you can run this a bunch of low drops, a bunch of 1 mana or 2 mana or whatever your converted mana cost of choice is, and then you guarantee that what you find off of that card is going to be your big bomb that's just going to finish off the game. So I don't know. This is another one to watch to see how well it performs, because I could definitely see this being a 4 of in decks that go all in on this combo. And if people can identify some really busted combos, then yeah, that's the route they're going to go. I think that finding this out of your library rather than trying to cheat it in from your hand is huge comparatively to some of the other cards like Ilharg that have fallen on deaf ears, and what the last one, Perforos, that hasn't really seen much play, because you have to have those cards in hand to cheat out, and it just hasn't worked out in these type of formats. All right, so on to the next one, which is the Snapdrax Apex of the Hunt. Snapdrax Apex of the Hunt is a 4 mana with Mutate 5 with Double Strike, and whenever this creature mutates, deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker and opponent controls, and you gain 4 life. I think this is the one that's most likely to hit in Standard decks, and not really be as good in like Pioneer, Modern, and whatnot, because it seems like it's the perfect ability for this particular Standard format. So 4 mana to give something Double Strike, so it curves, or be 5 mana, so it curves with a good 4-drop. I'm trying to think of a 4-drop right now that would like absolutely want Double Strike, and could just win the game with getting Double Strike. but it also will mutate and do 4 damage to a creature or planeswalker and gain 4 life, so you're going to actually get rid of a blocker there. So this could be the Siege Rhino of the format. I can see this being playing multiples. Again, someone in the comment section, let me know if this is something that triggers twice if you mutate Snapdrakes onto Snapdrakes. So yeah, you'll have to let me know on that one. So anyway, I think $10 though, that could go up more if it's sees play as a 4 of. Again, it's got the Mardu thing going against it, so it could be tough to. You could put this in like a black-white deck just with the mutate alone, but I think you'd want some way to cast it. All right, on to the next one, which is the Nephrite Apex of Death. This is mutate, or a 5-mana spell for 5 of Death Touch lifelink, and the mutate of 7, so it's got a really high price tag on that. And it says whenever this creature mutates, return a number of target creature cards with total power 10 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Another self-mill strategy. This seems like it could definitely do some wombo combos. So keep your eye on that for a 7-mana finisher with the mutate. I don't know how feasible that's going to be in the standard format, but this is another card that is just looking for the right scenarios in a self-mill type strategy to make it work. Interesting, definitely an interesting card, but I think the price point for this is probably a little bit high. I think most of these are going to be around the $5-6 when everything, the dust is settled, and that is still even depending on like a non-pandemic economy. So who knows though with this card? The potential's there. It just has to be proven before I would definitely start speccing in on this card. I think you have time and wait for deck lists and whatnot for this cards like this to be proven. We have Waynota, the Joiner of Forces. Whenever a non-human creature you control attacks with the top 6 cards of your library, you may put a human creature from among them onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. It gains indestructible until in turn put the rest on the bottom. I'm not sure if modern humans are going to want this as a curve topper. It does seem pretty good with 6 cards from the top of your library. You can Aether Violet in a turn and then go crazy with it. Of course, it doesn't work as good with like humans if they're going Coco humans in Pioneer. There are some other human strategies though in Pioneer that could use this also as a curve topper, but I'd have to wait and see. The mana on red-white is... Oh, never mind. It goes over non-humans. Womp, womp, womp. So I read that completely wrong. So whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, look at the top 6, and then put a human. Yeah, that's going to be hard to actually make it work in like humans in modern. So you need to have, I guess there's that theme that beasts and humans working together. So you've got the monsters versus the humans versus the monsters, and then you got the ones working together is the theme of this set. So yeah, actually, do you know what? This doesn't seem terrible. So if you set this up correctly in the right decks, you can run a lot of low to the ground humans, and it triggers off of every non-human, correct? Whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, look at the top 6 cards of the library, put a human creature card from among them onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking, indestructible, put the rest of the cards on the bottom, and it stays on the battlefield. So, ooh, yeah, potential is massive for this card. This is just a card begging to be broken. It does have some awkward scenarios, but if you run a bunch of low non-humans, so let's see in standard right now you have... let's see, 1-drops that are currently seeing play. I know we have a bird, a 1/1 bird. You have Hushbringer, the 2-drop slot. We have, so like, I'm thinking of white cards that see play. You have like the a 1/1 Teen Street Goblin. This seems pretty good with this. You have, that isn't a human. You have the 1/1 that deals the damage when it attacks. And that actually seems kind of neat because Torbrand's a human, so you could actually find that pairing together, and it will do 3 damage with the trigger if you stack it correctly. So yeah, I actually do think that this is going to have an archetype. It does seem to be powerful enough. It does seem to be degenerate enough. You're going to hit something off of top 6 if you have enough spread of humans. That's the problem, is you probably have to split this in half and say is looking at the top 3 cards of your library going to find you a human, because you got to think that half your creatures are probably want to be non-humans, but it's going to hit at your big payoff creature for sure, whether or not that be a 5-drop, a 6-drop. I mean, the sky's the limit for humans. There is some high converted mana cost humans. Once again, going back to Agent of Treachery, isn't that a human? That's pretty neat. A little card to grab with it, but I don't know. This one I could see actually going up a little bit more temporarily, but when Embercleave has a hard time, I know Embercleave just did a reprint, but it was seeing a lot of play for quite some time as a 4-of before it was reprinting the Challenger decks and had a hard time going up above 15. So again, this one's pretty reasonably priced, but I think this one is actually quite playable. All right, then we go on to Rail the Everwise. This is a 3 mana for 0/3. It gets +1/+0 for each instant or sorcery card in your graveyard. And whenever you discard one or more cards for the first time each turn, you draw that many cards. So this one's a little bit harder now actually reading it to make it worthwhile. A lot of these type of abilities need evasiveness to make them worthwhile, so it's either trample or flying. And this one has neither, so you need some other ways to set it up. It's interesting with giving a double strike off something like Temur Battle Rage, sure. And then discarding cards is the first time each turn, so you want like a big discard outlet. Most cards like cycling right now that this is working with is just one card. We have Cathartic Reunion, and it's going to get 2 cards. We have the Ox in the format that actually can get a ton of cards, and Cavalier that can get a ton of cards. But whether or not those want to be in the same deck, I could definitely see a Cathartic Reunion, Arclight Phoenix, and this being in the same deck. Maybe this is a one of, if you have it out and it works. But yeah, this one, I don't know if it's a card that's going to see a lot of multiples. And it's going to be pretty tough to actually make this one worthwhile. It has a lot of competition with the Royal Scions for that kind of draw discard type effect with like Phoenix and the Ox. But I mean, a combination of these could definitely make it a deck archetype. I think this one's a little bit high though, currently for its price tag. Next, we have Chevelle, Bane of Monsters. Death Touch at the beginning of your upkeep. If your opponents control no permanents with bounty counters, you put a bounty counter on a creature or planeswalker, and whatever permanent an opponent controls with a bounty counter dies, you gain 3 life and draw a card. This is kind of neat to set up with Fatal Pushes, Assassin's Trophies, and whatnot, because it can give you a lot of draw potential. The 1/3 is kind of awkward for what Black wants to be doing, like black-green. They want to be making this a 2/2 would probably be better. Death Touch, though, with the 1/3 is pretty neat, though. It's going to be hard to attack into, I guess, with this Death Touch, and then you'll be able to draw a card. And so in that case, it might end up being a little bit like Elvish Visionary if you can try to guarantee at least a card off it. The problem with this card, though, is it doesn't work well in multiples, being a legendary creature. A lot of people actually find that hard with 2-drops. This is something that you typically want multiples of. And if you have both in your hand, it really feels bad to have multiple in your hand, especially if they don't kind of work value-wise off of each other. And this has to go at the beginning of your upkeep. So you have to have the entire turn of Chevelle being alive, and then you put a bounty counter. And that's not too terrible, because then you can fire off your removal spell and then draw a card. Neat card. I don't think it's unplayable, but I do think the price tag is very, very high for this niche card. This is probably $3-4 if it does see play in the decks that it does see play. And I'm trying to think. There's quite a bit of synergy right now in decks that I think would run it. Kind of like the Golgari Adventures would have some. So the Knight that kills the Planeswalker creature and you lose 2 life. I mean, this kind of negates that, and then you also get to draw a card with that. I think there's one of the best 2-drop removal spells we've had in a long time. I don't know. I could see this card seeing play in the right meta for sure. All right, then we go into General Kudrow of Reigneth. It's a 3 mana 3/3 other humans you control get +1/+1. Whenever the general or another human enters the battlefield, exile target card from an opponent's graveyard. So it's going to have the ability to eat the graveyard, and then you can sacrifice 2 humans to destroy target creature's power 4 or greater. So this is an Anthem effect for 3 mana. Humans are typically getting Anthem effects for 2 mana in Modern. This could be a good one-of for Vile, especially a sideboard card. Definitely a very good sideboard card for eating the graveyard. I think that the price is going to go down for this particular one because it sucks in multiples. So again, most human decks are probably just going to run 1 or 2 of. It's a good utility card, though. The sacrificing humans is fine. Destroy creatures power 4 or greater. The giving all human creatures +1/+1 is neat. But we'll have to wait and see if there is a human archetype that actually works in Standard, which currently right now I'm not sure that's feasible. And we also have to see if like Pioneer humans could be a thing. This could be another Anthem effect that definitely does well for. I mean, you have Thali's Lieutenant that is playing that role right now, and it doesn't hurt to this. I think this is a slotted one in the sideboard for most human archetypes to begin with, so it's definitely not worthless. But the $7 price tag, I think this card definitely goes down. Last, but I don't know if it's least, last but maybe least or somewhat least, is Broxo's Apex of Forever. This is a 5 mana mutate 5 and trample, and you may cast it from its graveyard with its mutate. Now this feels like it has like a Rancor type ability. You're basically turning every non-human creature into a 6/6 trample. So all of your Llanowar elves can become 6/6 tramplers later on. You can forever cast this as long as it stays in your graveyard. Cast it in, cast it again. This isn't terrible, but is this something you want to see in multiples? I'm not sure. In self-mill type strategy, so we have like Tamiyo-based decks that can self-mill. We have the 2/1 Death Touch. There's a great little synergy right there is the Grim. Man, I can't think of the card. 2/1 Death Touch, you gain 2 life and put 2 cards in your graveyard. Perfect card for a strategy like that with like Euros. So a Sultai self-mill type strategy in Standard I think is pretty good. Turning that into a 6/6 Death Touch with Trample, that's pretty neat. That's not bad. And you do that on turn 5. And you can continue to, like Gilded Gooses, you turn into 6/6 flying tramples. I actually kind of like this one in Standard. I think that being the lowest mythic is saying something about this set. None of these cards seem like filler mythics. None of them seem like they're terrible. I would be pretty surprised if we don't see decks that are viable and see these cards see any number of play in a Standard by the time that they cycle through, because all of them seem interesting. So kudos. I don't think that any of them are necessarily like Okos that are just busted, or even Euros that are just busted beyond busted. I think one of the exceptions is Luminous Brood Moth. Could lead to some pretty broken things in Pioneer and Modern, and even possibly Standard. We'll have to wait and see if people can actually break the card in Standard. But I mean, there's plenty of things in Modern that removes counters, or our creatures enter without counters, or creatures can't have counters placed on them. Those type of things will make this Luminous Broodmother. So that's my pick of the mythic that has the most potential of going up. But like Broxos, I think has more potential. I think General and Chevelle are probably reasonably priced just based upon they have less versatility or viability in the decks they can go in. And then most of the other mythics are kind of in that same category. Is we have to wait and see if they are something that can see multiples. We're talking about 4-0s in decks, and then they have to be in, of course, tier decks in one of the formats for them to really hold that $15 or plus price point. Anyway, kind of a longer video for the Rogue Market. I thought I'd better get a video out there. I'm alive and well. Thanks for all of the people that have reached out and asked if I'm okay. I am okay. I just felt it was a little bit inappropriate talking about prices during this pandemic and buying and selling Magic cards. Had a lot of real world stuff to take care of too, to make sure that I'm okay, financially speaking, as we basically lost a lot of our income here with our store being shut down. So anyway, that's kind of what's going on. I'll try to release videos on more of a regular basis. I have nothing else going on with the store completely closed and, under lockdown here at my state. Anyway, this has been Kevin with the Rogue Market. Thanks for watching.